Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. Today I'm going to be talking about the David Mitchell uber novel or meta novel, however you want to define it. Seems like there's a few names out for it. But basically what it is just the fact that all of David Mitchell's books are interconnected in different ways for different books. So essentially, there is a standalone experience for every book. Then there is the meta fiction, meta story, the overarching, you could say good versus evil, but factions or forces at work in each of the novels. And then there is like a direct meta fiction thing that is apparently happening that I don't know about yet because I've only read Cloud Atlas and a little bit of two different books, but I'll get to that. My first stop on his interconnected journey is supposedly quite quintessential of David Mitchell's writing, though. It is Cloud Atlas, which I think will be the onboarding point for many people. So I just wanted to go into it now as a sort of mini review. Some of it will be spoilers, so when I get to that, I will mark it. But I can't really talk about what I want to talk about it without being spoilers. So at the point where it becomes spoilers, you should read the book and then come back and then listen to me, because what I want to try to do with these videos is sort of chronicle my reading experience of the meta novel in the order of which I'm reading it, because it changes how you contextualize and take in the story. And there's a lot of different opinions about where you should start, the order in which you should read. And for me, I've already read Cloud Atlas not knowing that they were interconnected whatsoever. And then it took me a long time to get all of his books, some of which I had to buy used. And then I just got Utopia Avenue, which prompted me to finally do this little odyssey. But some people think that you should read in publication order because you're guaranteed to make sense of everything because it's contextualized the way that it was outputted. The author himself, though, David Mitchell, has said that you can read them in whichever word that you want. It doesn't matter too much. I have also heard that you can read pretty much any book except The Bone Clocks, which you should read last. And the thinking behind this is that Bone Clocks introduces the meta-narrative in a big way and will prompt you to recontextualize all of the other books that you've read in a different way, depending on the book. It varies, of course, but if the meta-narrative is present and those characters in the meta-narrative are present, it will clue you into it. And so the person who says you should read it close to last, at least, is that you can have a standalone experience with all of these books without knowing the meta-narrative, and then you can consume the Bone Clocks and it will click for you. And so you can have both experiences, whereas if you have the Bone Clocks first, then it kind of robs you of the standalone experience of the other books. For me, however, I don't feel like I want to read the books twice in a row, and I think that maybe you would, depending on how good your memory is, how good you're at like associating this meta-narrative that I'm not even aware of to all of these other fictions. Like you're having to look back on your reading experience and just sort of like hammer out what is part of the fiction, what are these characters, what is Bone Clock saying about all these other books. Whereas, and I agree with this other person, was if you read Bone Clocks first, you're clued into the meta-narrative right away, and then you can look for it as you read all these other books. You lose the standalone experience, but at least you're getting sort of all of the information, and you're looking and hunting and sort of doing a fun little scavenger hunt of all these different things, and that sounded more fun to me. But so then I started reading Bone Clocks. I got 30% in, and then somebody was like, oh wait, don't read the Bone Clocks first, though, because it has spoilers for the 1,000 Autumns of Jacob de Zoet, or Zoet. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name. So then I stopped reading the Bone Clocks at 30%, picked up the Thousand Autumns of Jacob, and so I'm consuming that now, and I'm almost done. I'll go into that in the next video. But having consumed that as well as a little bit of the Bone Clocks, it does definitely color Cloud Atlas into a different light. So let me talk a little bit about Cloud Atlas. Like I was saying, structurally, Cloud Atlas is 5 or 6 different novellas, all of different genre conventions, all featuring different characters, which leapfrog into the next story. So it begins with a person who's, it's historical fiction, a person's on the ship, they have their own little, I won't give away the story there, but essentially the person on this ship starts consuming a piece of literature on it, and that springboards into the next story, which is linked to that. And every one of these sort of nested stories does that. As soon as a certain point is reached in the fiction, we leapfrog into the other fiction until it builds up pretty much all of them into a climax, and then it crescendos down and completes the book. So you might find that a little bit intimidating initially, but it's actually quite easy to hold the salient details in your head, and the overall theme brings it together quite well. But it ranges, like I said, from historical fiction to contemporary, sort of like a mystery thriller type situation, and then it goes into all the way up to cyberpunk, which is why I actually initially read it, and then it goes into like full-blown speculative fiction and whatnot, and there's even some other stuff going on there as well. But so you kind of get a feel for all of his different writing, if you like his dialogue, if you specifically like a certain genre convention that he does particularly well or not. This book will clue you into whether you want to read other books, because if some of them are historical fiction, such as The Thousand Autumns, the very first novella story, the Frobisher one, I believe, in Cloud Atlas, is written very much like The Thousand Autumns, and that's my favorite story for me in particular. So I knew that I would most likely, at least at a prose structural level, I would be into Thousand Autumns, and I intend to read all of them anyway, so it doesn't matter. But the theme of the book is that your actions have consequences, and there are forces at play beyond our knowledge in a sort of spiritual level. It's not a religious particular view whatsoever, I would say. It's more saying karmic destiny is at play. So now I'm going to get into spoilers. Also, you should read Cloud Atlas. I give it 5 stars. I loved it. It was nominated for a Pulitzer. It's fantastic, I think. And like other person said that I was talking to, it works as a very good litmus test for if you want to read other David Mitchell books or not. So now spoilers. So basically what we find out during this novel is some of these characters are actually a meta character, essentially. They are reincarnated into other bodies, and we see that in the movie as well as in the book with the comet birthmark, as well as some other indications that I won't go into. But there are their decisions in each of their stories across time affect each other, and it sort of is a interplay between the forces of good and evil for what that's worth. I don't like using those terms because they're not very helpful, but if you do good things, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the end of you, right? Like, you're still going to be reincarnated, and that karmic sort of value is disseminated into the world, has change, affects people's lives, and then influences your next life as well. So this sort of good and evil balance or whatever is constantly going back and forth as each force and faction collides with each other, basically. And so it's very interesting because it shows very easily or demonstrates that being altruistic and doing the right thing, even if you're not spiritual, even if you're whatever your belief system is, it still has a codified value of some sort on the other people around you, on your own happiness, on your future self and how you will live. In very tangible ways in some ways, like some of the characters become very monstrous even, and they're not very cognizant that they are monsters. They're making decisions as according to their values, but physically and morally and sort of like deep down in their hearts, if you could distill it down to that, they know that they're doing kind of the wrong thing. Like the fiction says that for the most part, you know, there's nuances where there's mental illness and there's people's upbringing and things like that that come into play, but the universe kind of knows, you know, if you're doing good or if you're doing bad, and you kind of know it as well for the most part. And one of the most iconic lines in the book and the movie is when this guy basically is being assailed by his stepfather, who's saying, like, don't do this, you'll bring yourself to ruin. It might be the morally just thing to do, but essentially all you're doing is being a drop in the ocean. And the guy says, what is an ocean but a multitude of drops? So it kind of like, it hits on the idea that even if you are just a drop in the ocean right now, and the sort of evil or whatever is the ocean, and you're trying to dilute it or whatever with the goodness of other people, eventually it will be a deluge or a storm or whatever. You can affect your surroundings, and enough people can be the ocean, and etc., right? I'm going to read Slade House next because it apparently acts as a coda for Bone Clocks. So I'm going to go from Autumn, the Thousand Autumns, to the Bone Clocks to Slade House, and then I'll just sort of make a decision of what I should read next based on probably the descriptions of things and just what piques my interest, and then we'll go from there. So this has been the first installment of the David Mitchell Uber book, or Uber novel, meta novel, whatever it is, and I will talk to you next time with my review of the Thousand Autumns of Jacob. And at that point, I will go into a review that is non-spoiler and spoiler, how it pertains to my meta-knowledge of what is happening in the book, so I can not spoil it for you or spoil it for you depending on what you want. Also, some people message me and ask why I'm a tabletop game designer and why I didn't have any books on display, so I put some of them up. I think I have 8 of them published or so now, but basically, I'm in this room quite often. This is my living room, and I generally want to see the book covers of the stuff that I'm consuming and not my own book covers. And I also had these upstairs in my office for when I'm playing games, so that, I don't know, just made more sense when I'm playing or running a tabletop game. They can see my games behind me rather than down here when I'm in the living room. It just seemed to make sense to me. So sometimes they'll be down here, sometimes they won't be. But here's some for you to look at now if that's what you wanted to see. If you have been reading or have already read all the David Mitchell books, I'd love some advice on where you fall, what you think consuming them was like for you, how it altered your view of each book, and your thoughts on the overall meta narrative stuff. To the point where I am now would be perfectly welcome. Just mark it with spoilers if you wanted to talk about that. And otherwise, I will see you for the next video soon. The Thousand Autumns of Jacob coming up. See you later.